large language model. I don't know if any of you have gotten a chance to try it, but I've heard it's the best one so far. And then Anthropic actually released a new model themselves here, Claude 3.7 Sonnet. So if you get the chance and you want to try a different model for ChatGPT, try out either Grok or Anthropic. Give those a try. And then just a quick website here, Crunchbase and TechCrunch, two really great websites if you guys are just trying to get like venture news, private equity news, whatever it might be. Skip through here. Next Monday, a few quick things. At 5 o'clock, there's going to be a professor here, or someone in the CRC, I think, is going to do a quick presentation on graduate programs. So if you guys are interested, scan this QR code. That'll be a virtual session Monday at 5. And then we'll have our meeting after that at 6. And I can send this in group me too. Upcoming schedule, we have today right here. Next week, we're going to have 43 North coming in. We're going to do a collab meeting with UBMA. It'll be downstairs in 103 probably. But again, I'll confirm the details if I go out on Instagram and in the group me as well. And yeah, that's about it. Hand it over to Todd and Kim, and then I'll have these here if you guys want to scan. If you're not a member, this is the one on the left is for new members. Group me QR code, and then we have a feedback QR code for anyone can submit anonymous feedback for what we can do in the future. And that's it. Everyone grab that. You good here? All right.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Welcome, everybody. How we doing? Good. Thought share maybe start off a little bit more about our background, where we came from. We are not Buffalonians. We are new to Buffalo this summer. Came from Indiana University, the Kelly School. I was born in New Jersey, went to University of Virginia undergrad, and then went to a consulting firm in the DC area, which is where I met Kim.
Right, and I grew up in Florida, but went to MIT and got a degree in marketing, which is a little unusual. And then went back and got my MBA and my PhD in marketing, well, when Todd did too.
Yeah, so we were in consulting for about 5 years plus, and when our first child was on the way, decided if and when we grew up, spending all our time on the road selling projects and all of that was not what we kind of wanted to do. So we decided to go back to academia. We both have parents who were college professors, and went to Indiana University. So that's what first got us.
Yeah, went to for our PhDs.
Yes, for our PhDs. And then good entrepreneurs correct each other all the time, so just get used to that. So then we went to Madison, Wisconsin. That was our first position out of the doctoral program. Went back to IU and were there for 20 plus years until Buffalo knocked on our door. We also happen to have 2 daughters who are here. One is a resident in anesthesiology. The other got her MBA from Hopkins and is doing marketing analytics. And they both love Buffalo. How many of you are from Buffalo? About half, a little less. All right. So yeah, so that's what brought us here.
You left out a big piece.
Go for it.
All right. What brought us from Madison to Indianapolis
Yes.
was I got headhunted into a market research firm with as I was finishing my PhD. And if you don't know anything about PhDs and teaching, you have to publish research, and it takes a really long time. And I got bored after doing my dissertation, and I wanted to go practice doing things. So went to the largest customer satisfaction measurement company. Then we used Todd's research to create a new product that I launched for them, where I got to measure the reputation of Nike, Coca-Cola, and United Health on the day after they lost 70% of their market capitalization value. Big day. And then got headhunted to Lilly, and then got headhunted over to a startup pharmaceutical where I was the director of marketing and helped them have their first quarter of profit. That is a good feeling. And then they moved the company headquarters, so I went back and started teaching, and he taught at IU for 27 years.
We brought her back from the dark side, back to academia, to IU. And a little on our entrepreneurial background. So actually we started our first company together as we were leaving our consulting firm. So we were moving into, we made, when we started, went back to the doctoral program, about 10% of what we were making as consultants when we made the transition to academia as doctoral students. So we had a 1-year-old, 9-month-old when we did that. So we started our own consulting firm, and the first July, when we left the consulting firm before the next semester started, we actually made more money that July than we had in any month as consultants, just selling projects and doing them independently. But so that was kind of a fun gig, and have started some different things along the way. The Titanic Effect is a book that we wrote together. We've done about, what, 20 angel investments?
25.
25, yes, even more. So pretty active.
3 have exited.
In the venture community. 3 exits.
No, 5 have exited. 3
Well,
were good.
Three,
and 2
three
were
for,
bad.
yes. 2 goose eggs. We like to forget those. Yeah, so we started a couple companies. One was a health tech company that got acquired a 1.5 years ago. Just closed out actually at the end of 2024 with some provisions. But so we've been very active in the venture community, both as investors, but also working with startups, and that's what led to the Titanic Effect, was kind of packaging that rather than in the classroom, trying to capture those lessons, because we've had entrepreneurs who are at various stages in their development, and a lot of the common mistakes that we're making really were very similar or overlapping. So whether you're getting into this as an investor, we'll talk a little bit more about your folks' perspective, what you're here for, because we'd like to know, what your aspirations are. But once you start to see patterns of what are the mistakes they make, or what we, in our terminology, what are the icebergs or deadbergs that they run into, you can start to have a little better anticipation of how might you navigate that so it doesn't sink your ship, so you can keep sailing. So that's going to be kind of the recurring theme that we'll be weaving into our presentation.
Yeah, and it's been pretty fun. People have written to us through the website, who even knew anybody did that, to say, I've been managing my business using this book, so I wondered if we could get together and talk. Cool. We've had people who were thinking about joining a startup read the book and use it to negotiate a better compensation package, right? We've had investors.
We presented at Uber headquarters in 2019. That was pretty cool.
That's pretty cool. So.
Yeah, so fun stuff, fun journey, and we're excited to be here in Buffalo. Want to get a better sense of you, who you are, where you're coming from. How many are graduate students? A few, mostly undergrads. Majors, we heard a lot of finance majors. Okay, what else? What do we have?
Just management.
Don't say just management. Say it proudly. Management. Okay. Others? Marketing, good, yeah. Economics. I was economics undergrad. Kim was, as she said, marketing undergrad, and then PhD in marketing. My PhD is actually in strategy first and entrepreneurship second. I actually created the entrepreneurship doctoral program at Indiana University with my thesis chair, and that was a fun journey. It's one of its biggest departments. Other thoughts? You want to go into the funding side or financing side of things, or how many of you want to start a company, be an entrepreneur? Got a few of those. Some combination. What we find is people tend to wear a lot of hats. They start companies, make some money, go into the investing or advising side, and then they get the bug again and go start another company. So lots of ways to enjoy this journey over your years of involvement. But you're on a great path, just getting affiliated with like-minded folks and learning a little bit more about what the journey might look like. Anything else? Any questions before we move forward? All good? All right. So we're going to start with kind of the top 10 misconceptions. So when you start learning about the entrepreneurial community and you start, as you're reading the media and things, it's always interesting how there are these big disconnects between what we've experienced as the lived kind of journey of the entrepreneurs and early stage investors that we work with versus what people seem to believe. So this is the old white guy, Victor Kiam. He bought a company called Remington. In fact, he was famous for having this commercial, I like the product so much, I bought the company. But he did a leverage buyout on it. And this is his quote: entrepreneurs are risk takers, and you can read the rest, but roll the dice, they assume responsibility, and they shoulder all the burden. Great quote, right? Really colorful and kind of sums up a lot of the media and typical feelings about entrepreneurs. Reality is there are two major flaws in this. One, the entrepreneurial journey is seldom a solo journey. It's a team sport, and it's a contact sport. So you want to surround yourself with other people who are helping you through that journey. The other piece is the idea of kind of this rolling your dice and taking risks. And that's one of the top misconceptions about entrepreneurs, is that they are prone to taking risks. And there's now decades of research that actually that's not the case. Entrepreneurs are not any more likely to take risky activities, to go to Vegas and bet, for example, than other folks. What they are is more comfortable and become skilled at navigating uncertainty. And we'll talk a little bit more about the difference between that and what that kind of means for entrepreneurs. So, good lead up to our top 10 misconceptions. Entrepreneurs are mavericks. And you think about, for example, Mark Cuban, you've probably seen him on Shark Tank. Mark Cuban, personifies that stereotypical, not just owning the Mavericks, but being one, right? Little bit of a clown, lots of characteristics that you would think about as being associated with entrepreneurs. Somebody who's been equally successful, Mike Hatfield on the right side, also an alum of the Indiana University Kelley School, but as unassuming, super strategic guy, but doesn't like to be out there, doesn't like to be out front. Just a very low-key but very thoughtful, and at one time made more money for Silicon Valley investors than any other entrepreneur in history. But if you looked at them, if you saw their personality profile, etc., dramatically different in terms of the persona kind of that they represent, and kind of counter to this entrepreneurs are mavericks. They're bungee jumping, purple-haired people who think differently.
Well, funny story though, I think about Mike Hatfield.
Yeah.
And he is like a 6-time billion-dollar exit guy, right? He's a serial entrepreneur, was an engineer out of Bell Labs. So a lot of his stuff is in networked technology.
Okay. Yeah.
But we've had a few conversations with him lately. He's been a friend of ours for 20 years, right? And every time we suggest meeting on Zoom, he sends us his phone number. And we're like, we have your phone number. We've had your phone number for almost 20 years. He does not even like to be on Zoom, right? We do all of our conversations with him by phone.
Yep, interesting guy. All right, ventures need a roadmap. So, you have that idea of what a roadmap looks like, right? What are some of the characteristics of a roadmap? Well, it's top down. It's very rational, right? You have the data that you need. You literally have laid out in front of you your starting point, your end point, and you even know the roads along the way that you're going to use to get there. But that leads to a certain degree of inflexibility if you think about the journey in the terms of the metaphor of a roadmap. And it's more about the plan, right? You have a driver, maybe you have a navigator, and then everybody else in the company is kind of in the back of the bus and along for the ride, maybe not singing too many annoying songs while you're trying to navigate those roads. Well, this is not a good metaphor for any kind of strategic endeavor under uncertainty, but particularly for the startup journey. So we like to counsel entrepreneurs view it as like a set of sailing instructions. You have that paradise island that you're trying to get to, right? That destination. And you need that vision, you need that inspiration, that passion to be able to get there. But you need to have the whole crew involved. Everybody in your organization has to be monitoring. What are the storms that come up in the form of competition, for example? How do we respond to when the wind changes, when the currents change? We still want to get to that paradise island, but there's a lot we need to monitor and process along the way to keep on that journey and keep on it successfully, and everybody needs to be involved in that. So metaphor of sailing as opposed to thinking about it as a roadmap.
I was going to say our drive back from Philadelphia
That was a good
about
one.
a week ago is really a better analogy. We land in Philadelphia at 7 o'clock, we were even 20 minutes early, right? And we're trying to get to Buffalo. This is a Sunday night for Monday morning classes at 9:30 a.m. And the flight's canceled. We see there's a flight to Rochester. We dash over there and try and get on that flight. By the time we get there, it's canceled. And they've rebooked us for 24 hours later, which means like a dead day. It's 9 o'clock at night, we would fly out the next day. So
And Kim had 2 classes on Monday.
So we looked at each other and we were like, road trip, right? We go down, we get an all-wheel drive vehicle, and we start. And we know we're in Philly, and we know we have to get to Buffalo. And I would say throughout the trip, that was the only 2 things that remained constant. We hadn't eaten, so we were also looking for food. But the roads were shutting down, we were being rerouted, you know, we had to be very careful of turns, in and out of the snow. You know, there's a yellow line coming, that's so, let's figure out. And, you know, we just stayed vigilant, and 7 hours later, we were here.
Yeah, we didn't have to sail. All right, I think this guy, oh no, I'm on this one too, yeah. So business plans are passé, you kind of hear this, and when you think with the roadmap mentality, you also think about the business plan, and you will have people tell us, oh, all you need is, you know, your plan on a napkin, or, you know, your business model canvas as a more current kind of version of that. The reality is that, yes, the plan itself is not all that important. No investor is going to write a check because of your plan, but the process that goes into creating the plan, the discipline that that brings to linking all of the different functional elements, the marketing pieces with the funding pieces, with the operations, and how all those tie together, that part of planning is really essential. So people think about the plan as, again, being like a roadmap, a template for success, a way to package all your jargon in a way that gives you a detailed technology roadmap, a document you can hand to sell investors, or a way to justify that hockey stick that every entrepreneur has in terms of how rapidly they're going to grow. The reality is the business plan does a little bit of those things, but that's not the primary reason. Again, it forces integration, it forces much deeper thinking than you're going to get in a venture overview, or you're going to get in a business model canvas about the different pieces that need to work seamlessly together for the venture to be able to move forward. And now, I turn it over to you.
All right, so the 4th one is first movers win. I have a textbook I'm teaching from right now, and it says first movers win, and that is wrong, wrong, wrong. Academic research has shown out of 66 different industries, the first mover failed in 60 out of 66 of them. The second mover is who wins, and that's because they're able to identify what the first mover did wrong. Take the Apple iPod, I mean, hugely successful, $800 million business at one point in time. It came onto the scene about 2 or 3 years after the first one of these. And this is all built on improving a Walkman, right? So it wasn't like they were hugely disruptive. The first people were Rio. I think we had a Rio, didn't we?
We did. Yeah.
We did have a Rio, yeah. And then we had a bunch of iPods. So iPod figured out what the Rio did well, and then dwarfed it, and that
well,
happens.
and Apple's famous for this, right? I mean, they weren't the first in the watch, they weren't the first in the iPod, the iPad,
the Newton,
or the music devices. So, they're a fast follower who just does it better.
So one of the things, a piece of research we're doing right now is looking at vertical industries and waves of investment, and looking to see if where investors make the most money. Do they make it with the first movers, with the first wave, with the second wave, right? Because if you're too far out there, sometimes you're out there before the market is even ready for you. And you're just starting to create the market that somebody else is going to take advantage of.
And Garrett, you mentioned Crunchbase and a couple other really good sources. PitchBook is another really good one, and I don't know if students have access to that, but it's something to think about for this group. Because PitchBook has great data on investment patterns over time.
Beg the dean for it.
Etc. Yeah.
We're begging the dean for it.
Yeah, we are too. So if we have, you guys and us, we might get more traction. But great source of data on investing over time.
The next one is the best technology wins, which is also not true. Here is a typewriter that is supposed to be the fastest typewriter in the world, the Remington, but that is not what we use. We use a QWERTY, and that's because somebody got it embedded better and more.
Does anybody know why the QWERTY that represents? Yeah.
Isn't it his last name? QWERTY on the top keyboard?
Oh, could be.
That could be. I don't know. But mechanically, in the original typewriters, the keys would across each other if they were too close together. So it was engineered to keep the physical key from overlapping with another key and getting stuck, and being able to have the strike pattern be as quick as possible with as few jams as possible. And that was 140 years ago or something like that.
The
and
one
it is
came
just
out
stuck.
from Carnegie Mellon,
Yeah.
from a university created what would be an easier to use, faster keyboard.
They had a competition.
They had a competition. This
Never
one
took
won, you never see it, right? There was a hand.
Yeah, sorry.
Or no, I was just gonna answer the question.
Oh, okay. The other one is Betamax was theoretically a technologically superior paradigm for DVD or videotapes, but VHS won. So having the best technology is no guarantee either.
Kim even made me get rid of our 8-track tapes when we moved here, so.
Yeah, I did. He still has VHS in boxes though, so.
True.
And one of our favorites, entrepreneurs answer nobody. I don't want to be beholden to the man. I'm going to go start my own company. Hey, guess what? Now you're beholden to everybody. Right? Now you get to take out the trash. Now you get to do anything and everything. So it is the opposite of answering to nobody. I think you're next.
Yep. All right, so continuing with number 7, entrepreneurs are born, not made, that there is this gene. We've talked a little bit about this. But again, the metaphor we like to think about is, rather than saying a successful entrepreneur is born or through some combination of luck or circumstance is able to be super successful, and think about it more in terms of like batting average, right? So the difference between sitting the bench if you're batting 280 versus being an all-star, Shohei Ohtani, two-source threat, right? He's a pitcher and a batter, incredible, is the difference between, again, 0.28 versus 0.35, and you're an all-star. So think about the training as not guaranteeing that your next or your first venture is going to be successful, but you're improving the odds that you're going to make a series of better decisions along the way that keep you from sinking and increase your chances of likelihood that you're going to be able to move forward successfully. And that's what we as entrepreneurship professors and marketing professors are trying to do. We can never make you hit 1,000, right? But we can increase the odds so that you are much better than your average entrepreneur, your average innovator, as making the right kinds of decisions. Next one, entrepreneurship is all or nothing. This is another where, particularly at the undergrad level in programs across the country, it's kind of portrayed as you're either a chicken or you're taking the plunge, right? And if you're really serious and you're committed, you're going to take that leap and be an entrepreneur, and otherwise you're not, it's not worthwhile. But the reality is, if you look at successful entrepreneurs over time, there are a lot of different ways that people move forward. One is what you call kind of the dip in the toe in the water, right? You get a little closer, you join groups like this, you network, you get to learn a little bit more about entrepreneurs, maybe you do an internship, and that gives you the opportunity to get a little closer to that community, figure out if it's for you, but it's not, again, an all or nothing. Another is joining a team, right? So I would recommend, if you're interested in the entrepreneurial journey, but you don't have that thing yet that you want to start, join a team of an earlier stage venture. Mike Hatfield, who we talked about, he worked, as Kim mentioned, at Bell Labs, so that was one of the big Ameritech, the Bell breakup organizations. He moved to a smaller part of that company that had been acquired, that was about a tenth of the size, but still had thousands of employees. They were in the process of buying another small tech company in California. He moved out to San Francisco, joined the leadership team of that group, and then he and 2 of his colleagues broke off and started. So moving from big company to startup was a 4-step process for Mike, but that gave him the training and the confidence to be able to transfer the big company skills to the kind of startup environment. So joining a team, taking a series of steps, think about it as a stepping stone into that journey of uncertainty, can take some of the pressure and stress off of feeling like it's an all or nothing leap. All right, Benjamins.
It's all about the Benjamins, right? Come to us, we've had students come to us and say, ooh, I want to make $1 million. What should I start? Right there's the problem, right? Entrepreneurs have a passion for solving a problem. And if you have that passion, then you will find a way to solve the problem. And if you solve that problem better than anyone else, the Benjamins will come. That's how we have people who have 6 exits over $1 billion. That's how friends of ours, the guy had a dry cleaning business, and he was pissed that it cost him so much to advertise to his own customers because he had to use the mail. So he came up with email marketing. That company went public and then got purchased by Salesforce for $2.6 billion. 15 years later, right? You do it to solve a problem, and the Benjamins will follow, not vice versa. And then, of course, you do know that hoodies do not make all the difference. Even though Zuckerberg was a hoodie person, I mean, Todd tried it himself, but that did not make our startup successful. You can't fake it till you make it. And by the way, I told him today it would have to be a fleece vest from Patagonia.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. This is back to you.
Yeah, so just going a little deeper into managing uncertainties, we've got a little bit more, and then clear the table for questions and more interaction. First, as we talked about, it's about uncertainty, it's not about risk. Let's talk a little more about that, because that's more than kind of an academic distinction or just the language. So risk is probabilistic. So if you think about games of dice, games of cards, you know that unless your dice are kind of funny, you're going to roll between a 2 and a 12. Your odds of rolling a 7 are higher than your odds of rolling a 2 or a 12. And games or exercises that are characterized by risk have that feature where you know the range of outcomes, and you even may know the probabilities of the spread of outcomes. And some people like to take the risk where they'll spend a lot of money on rolling a 2 or a 12 and hitting big or losing everything. Other people might not bet on dice at all, which is your typical entrepreneur, or they'll bet a small amount on a 7, which is a much less risky kind of proposition. That's very different from uncertainty, where you don't know the probabilities or even potentially the range of outcomes, other than it can completely bomb or it could be a huge success. And these two operate in actually a different part of your brain. So if you think about risk, it's more that kind of calculative forefront of your brain where you are making an assessment. And some people are really good at that, and some people are take a little longer to do it. Whereas the uncertainty is that fight or flight response, and could trigger either that runaway, this is uncomfortable, or I got this, I've navigated this before, I have some of the tools. So the good thing about that scenario and thinking about it this way is that as professors, we can teach things that make you better at understanding and navigating that uncertainty. We can give you tools so you're not looking to fly when that first bit of uncertainty comes up, and instead you feel like you have some tools, you have a network that you can leverage to kind of analyze.
All right, we have
that.
to tell a real world story to make
Okay,
this come
go
on.
for it.
All right,
Yeah.
so this really became clear to us. We were over in Germany at a conference on entrepreneurship at the Max Planck Institute, and we had an extra day, so we decided we would rent
This was in
mountain
the
bikes.
Bavarian Alps south of Munich,
Yeah.
if any of you know Germany. But
Anyway, we decided to rent some mountain bikes, right? We loved a mountain bike, and we've been mountain biking for 20 years? Yeah, 20 years.
25 started when we turned 40.
Yeah, well, we're not 65 yet.
Well,
so-
okay, 20 was.
Anyway, so we rent these mountain bikes, and we're kind of used to kind of lightweight American mountain bikes, and these are like German tanks. They're like really heavy. And there was this place where you could take the cable car up to the top and get lunch, and we're like, oh yeah, here's a map, we'll just mountain bike up there and grab some lunch. And we get started, and this thing is super steep. So
And
we're
gravel.
gravel with switchbacks, but huge chunks that were just super steep. So we're like biking around 12 minutes and getting off and resting, and then back on another 12 minutes. So we get to the top. Took us an hour and a half. We got to the top. We lock up our bikes. We walk up to get our lunch. We get our lunch. We come back. Now what do? We know what the way that we came up was. And going up was pretty difficult. Going down is going to be really fast and gravelly. Or the map shows this little winding trail through the woods by where we had locked our bikes and kind of circling back around. So which one should we take? The one we know, that's highly risky, or the one we don't know anything about?
I know the answer. The uncertain one that we don't know anything about.
That's what he likes. I was like, no way in hell I'm going through the woods. Don't have any clue what that is. I will walk this bicycle all the way down this hill if I have to not do that. And he says, but we're good mountain bikers. We can handle it. I'm like, really? Because like we knew what we were doing to get here, right? So he says, I'll start, and in 5 minutes, I'll come back and tell you if it's okay. And I'm like, that's fine, I'll start with you. So we go about a minute, and we have to get off our bikes and haul it over a tree. And I'm like, see? We go another minute, and there's another tree. I'm like, yeah, this isn't that much fun. And finally he's like, okay, you just wait. And he calls out, and it was perfect, and we got all the way back. Just fine. It was way better than going down that hill.
Get through the first couple hurdles, that's all. Yeah, so it was funny how our personal predispositions toward risk versus uncertainty and the known versus the unknown kind of manifested there in that particular circumstance. All right, so thinking about those early stages, which is where the most uncertainty exists, and you never get past that point of having uncertainty, even when you're looking to get acquired and you've raised your C round and you have tens of millions of dollars invested. There's still big pieces of uncertainty that you have to navigate, but the early pieces are really where it becomes most prominent. So we like to think about, and there's a lot of research, and academics have to come up with a fancy term, right? So a lot of research once called the nascent entrepreneur or the potential entrepreneur. Those are people who have ideas, might be thinking, we've got a number in this room, that at some point they want to start a company. And then on the other side, there are the ventures that launch and then have some kind of exit. They go public, they get acquired. Those kinds of things are great events in the life of an entrepreneurial kind of journey. But in the middle, typically in the neighborhood of 3 to 10 to 15 years between having that idea, starting to move the journey forward, and being out on the other side. So let's talk a little bit more about the funding pieces that come back to your group here, and particularly those with more of a finance bent or thinking about getting involved. And this may be information that the group has kind of covered, or maybe in a little bit different way. But when you think about those earliest stages, you're typically leveraging your own funds, drawing on credit cards, your own bank account, maybe leaning on friends and family. And then you're starting to get into the angel investor group. So those are typically less formal, people betting with their own money instead of venture capital firms that are actually professional investors, right? They raise money and then invest on behalf of the folks they've raised money from. So in those earliest stages, you might be looking for $10,000 to $250,000 just to get proof of concept, build your minimally viable products, start moving the venture forward. As you move into the angel investing route, that's where it starts to get a little bigger in terms of the dollars, anywhere between 50 to maybe as much as $1 million or a little bit more. And that's where you're really starting to scale the venture. So you move beyond proof of concept and you're trying to build your customer base, etc. At that point is when you typically see the transition to seed and venture capital in different rounds, A, B, C, etc. Where you'd be looking to, as little as 2 to 3 million. Now, typically VCs are looking to even do a little bit more than that, up to 50 million. But before you even get to private equity, certainly bank financing or loans, these are the typical dollars associated and some of the steps in that journey of funding. Now, while everybody likes to, and when every entrepreneur gets and presents their hockey stick, it's usually this nice kind of progression. The reality is it's much more of what's called a punctuated equilibrium model, where you have these periods of rapid growth followed by a little bit of a leveling off. So if you think about these inflection points, what's happening here, you raise a round of funding, you hire some people, you're building more product, you're selling more customers. That doesn't hit revenue right away, takes a little bit of time, then you get this escalation point, that starts to tail off, and that's when you raise your next round of funding. So recognize, and you know, in our angel groups and with investors, they kind of laugh at these entrepreneurs that graph or have a table with month-on-month growth as always being, we're going to grow 10% every month. No, you're not. You're going to go 30%, then you're going to level off and be flat. Might even have a downtick as you start to lose some customers that aren't really a best fit for you, and then you'll have another wave of growth. So thinking about not just the revenue side, but the funding side, and how you manage those investment cycles to get to that next inflection point where you can then raise more money is an important way to kind of think about the capital gap, what's out there, where the dollars are, and where you, if you're on the investor side, might want to be involved.
All right, because if we look across startups over time, we'll see there's a pretty typical development path that they follow. The first is just pre-revenue when they're developing ideas. And there's a lot of customer discovery that goes on here. We don't really know what it's going to be. This is a time where companies have a lot of pivots as they're exploring what they want to do and discovering, well, that didn't really seem like it was going to pan out. Eventually, you're able to get that minimally viable product and get your first customers. And again, you're going to be pivoting because maybe the first customers aren't the best customers. Eventually, you'll get replicable product growing your customer base, and eventually to scalable a product and a business model. Somewhere in here, between, I don't know which makes this point. Is the pointer? Yeah.
There you go.
Somewhere in here is where you're going to need to find something called product market fit. And that product market fit doesn't necessarily align with your funding. So last year I was doing a lot of work with a startup, a med tech startup. They were on their Series D money. And it was pretty clear, looking from the marketing perspective, they did not have product market fit. And all of the problems that they were encountering where they had not really figured out exactly what this product should do for people, and it didn't quite deliver. But they still got another $50 million to move forward. So they got their E without having product market fit. They couldn't scale. They won't scale until they get that product market fit. So that's really critical. So what happens as you think about the entrepreneurial problem is that you're having to expand across 4 domains at once, okay? So you have an idea that you have to get started. You have to figure out who the customers are. You don't start out with any money, and you don't have any employees. But to grow, you have to have these things shift out at a somewhat equal rate. So you're going to get to your MVP. You're going to start some customer trials. You're going to start to raise friends and family money. You're going to start to have to hire a team. But to really get to a scalable product, you need to have five-ish customers, outside funding, employees, and advisors. And it's just a lot to keep that progressing equally. You can look at some, great failures. Theranos had a whole bunch of customers and no product. So you have people with expectations and you can't meet them, right? We sometimes see people get a lot of money, but they still also don't have any customers. So you want this to be sort of growing at a similar pace. So what we came up with the book was that you have these different oceans of uncertainty, the human ocean, the marketing ocean, the technical ocean, and then the strategy ocean. And the key is to remove uncertainty and avoid hidden debts. So the process of navigating uncertainty, things come up. You have to make choices. You don't completely understand what the implications and consequences are of those choices. So you've taken on a debt that's not really visible to you, and you're not monitoring it. So you buy a car, you take on a loan, you see your debt. You buy a house, you take on a mortgage, you see your debt. You go to school, you take on a loan, you see your debt. What happens in startups is they don't see the debts, and they don't track the debts, which means that things interact, and the debt here overlaps the debt there, and the next thing you know, your startup is busted. And so we put the book together in order to help people recognize where those hidden debts are so that they didn't stumble over them. You get this back.
All right. Yeah, and we chose not to go too much into the Titanic itself, but the whole kind of premise of the Titanic Effect, if you go back and look at choices that were made, 150 years ago, when White Star Line started building the Titanic and they moved into these big, gigantic ships, and some of the choices they made across those different domains that Kim was talking about, the human side, the crew, the captain, the marketing side, what they did to accommodate more luxury in a 2-story dining room or a ballroom instead of what was built into the design by the engineers, some of the corners that they cut in terms of they ran out of rivets literally to build this big ship, so they used to a substandard kind of material. So
Which is okay unless you get an iceberg.
Yes, it's fine until. Again, a lot of parallels between these choices that were made 120, 150 years ago for White Star Lines moving into the Titanic and it leading to 1912 and the crash. So what we're doing here is to kind of pull it back to what are some of the typical things that either if you're involved in starting a company or joining a company or maybe looking at investing in a company early on, we often get asked this question, what's the biggest debt burden earliest on in these different kind of times of the evolution? So in the human ocean, one that we like to talk about is inequitable equity. So that's how equity gets kind of parceled out between co-founders. What is very typical is what we call the curse of thirdsies. 3 entrepreneurs sitting around having a beer and say, hey, let's start this company, we'll each take a third of it. 6 months later, one person's doing all the heavy lifting because somebody else got a job and someone else has family issues, right? So you want to make sure that you protect the equity in that the people who are actually making the contribution and helping the company move forward are the ones who actually earn that equity over time, and that's through a process called vesting. Is that something you guys have talked about or are familiar with the group here? Or?
I wouldn't say we've gone in depth.
Okay.
Maybe we brought it up once or twice.
Okay, so familiar term and just really important to think about is that people don't get their equity in a lump sum up front. Even if you're a co-founder, you earn it over typically a 3 to as long as 5-year period and earn that over time. In moving into kind of the marketing ocean, and Kim can speak more eloquently about that, but big debt burden is not being able or willing to focus on a group of customers. We could also, everybody's gonna love this thing. Well, if everybody loves it, how are you gonna market to everybody? Hugely expensive, right? So you have to pick the customer group that you are going to own. You're not gonna get 1% or 3% or 5% of that market. You're gonna get 30, 40, even 80 to 90% of that market because they are so dialed into wanting the problem solved that you help them accomplish. And identifying those is the best way to get some early traction in avoiding the value void in your customer relationships and incomplete segmentation of your base and not prioritizing who you're going to focus on first. As you move into the technical ocean, so this is the part where you're actually building product, where some of the common challenges there. This is an example of was it a Kickstarter?
It was a Kickstarter and an incubator. So
And it came through an incubator. And they raised money to be able to build this, thinking that if we could actually put an iPad in a steering wheel, that will be awesome. And they spent a couple $100,000 to prototype and build this out. And then found that actually only them and a few other friends really cared about having this kind of form function of being able to put your iPad in an actual steering wheel. If they had just done on top, right, and mocked up something in cardboard, they'd have spent 10, 20 bucks, taken it out there and gotten a feel for what do people like or don't like, is anybody actually gonna buy this? So start with as low a fidelity product for your MVP as you can to just kind of get that test base. And then finally in the strategy ocean, resourcing appropriately to be able to, as Kim was presenting, solve those different problems of the team, the customers, the investor piece, and who you're actually selling to, so that you can grow those over time, raise enough money to get to that next inflection point, but not more, because you don't want to give up too much equity too
And if
early.
you really wanna see this, watch Silicon Valley,
Yeah.
the show where they have way too much resources, way too early, and do dumb things.
All right, so this is the Titanic at the bottom of the ocean, and what we hope is that through keeping some of these things in mind, you can all engage in your journey much more successfully and sail to your paradise island. That's all we had on prepared content. We want to make sure we left plenty of time for questions, reflecting on any part of either our journey personally or some of the things you heard tonight, but happy to address anything you got. But you guys, was this what you brought us in to do? Is this kind of along the lines at least of what you were hoping or thinking, or?
I think so. I mean, for our meetings this semester, it's been like mostly investment side of things, but now it's like, how do you actually build a company? And we haven't had that yet, so I think that's what I wanted out of this, and I think I'm hoping that's what we got. I'm more curious from my perspective about an MVP. Like, how do you go? What is an MVP for one thing? And how do you go from ideating, just like thinking of an idea, and then actually building a product to test if it fits the market?
Yeah, and it varies so much if you're a device, for example, or you have a physical product where you need a prototype. I would say one, and I don't know what resources you have here, or if you've explored kind of 3D printing as an example, but you know, historically, until really even the past, 5 to 10 years, if you wanted to build a plastic widget, you had to go out and spend a couple $100,000